It was the end of January 2022, 5 weeks before our wedding, and I picked up the phone to hear the worst news I've ever gotten.
Leo and Charlie, your dad and I wanted to create these videos for you so you would have some of the stories that we lived through while starting Cork Candles. So why don't you tell us about that worst call that you ever got?
Yeah, it was 5 weeks before Lauren and I got married. And I picked up the phone to learn that our dog walker had Rocky out on a walk and he had broken loose from her and he had run off. At the time we lived in North Philly. We didn't know where he had gotten to. He had gone running, and about an hour later we saw a video on Facebook of Rocky running through the streets 5 miles north of our house. And so I jumped in the car, I raced home, and your mom left the hospital where she was working, and we just started looking. We saw a video here, a picture there, and we just started chasing. Wherever we saw him last, we went, and we went as quickly as we could in a panic to try to find the dog. The sun set and it started to get cold. It was the end of January. The temperature dropped to about 4 degrees, and it snowed about 6 inches. It was freezing outside, and we were terrified of what was coming.
It wasn't just you and Lauren doing this, though. There were other people helping.
We were incredibly fortunate that Lauren's parents lived in New Jersey, and they both jumped in the car. They came down to help. Now, at the same time, your grandfather and I were getting ready to open the King of Prussia store. And the store that we have today, in a large part, was built by you. We were doing this together. We were painting the walls. But when this happened, I dropped everything, and I went looking for Rocky. And so you laid all of the flooring.
Yep.
You finished painting the walls. You hung all the shelving that we see in here. And you even finished building some of the tables that we have in the space.
Yeah.
And I felt guilty that this was a partnership, but I had to abandon the work that I was contributing to go and look for Rocky. And the work we did was a lot. We hung over 700 flyers throughout North Philly. We did multiple nights of stakeouts where Lauren and I hopped in the car at the end of our day of work. We sat where we had heard of a sighting last. We waited and we took alternate shifts. I would stay up for 2 hours drinking coffee at 2 in the morning. And then Lauren would wake up and relieve me, and I would get a nap. And then the sun would come up, and we knew when the sun would come up that Rocky would be planted, that he would stay where he was, and we would have missed our opportunity. And so we would go home, we would shower, and we would go to work for the day. But we did all of these things just based on our own gut instinct. We created our own plan of how we could find Rocky and try to bring him home. There were 2 different instances actually where this happened. I had a bike. Remember, it was cold and snowy, but the streets were cleared enough for me to ride around North Philly. And it's not the safest area. And as I'm riding around 4:30, the sun's starting to set, police officer flagged me down and said, "Son, it's not safe for you to be out here. You need to go home." And twice I was told to stop my search, to go home for safety reasons. And at one point it had been 3, maybe 4 days without another sighting. And we were starting to lose hope that we'd be able to find Rocky and bring him home. And the tipping point for us was we were introduced to a woman named Babs who lives out in the San Diego area, and she runs a program to help folks find their lost dogs. And we connected with Babs, we had a few phone calls, and she laid out a plan that was very different from what we were doing. Lauren and I were searching for Rocky. We were calling out. We were driving everywhere we could possibly go, doing everything we could possibly do, feeling like we were that duck on the pond, pedaling 1,000,000 miles an hour, but we didn't feel like we were making any progress. And Babs came in and she laid out this really clear plan. She said, you have to focus on being stationary. You have to change your flyers to look this way. It'll have a bigger impact. You have to think about controlling scent by not spreading your scent all over the area. And so she gave us an option. She said, I only work with clients who commit to the plan that I lay out. Otherwise, it'll be a waste of my time and it'll be a waste of yours. What she was saying was, you have to decide, we had to decide, were we going to follow her plan or were we going to continue to do our own thing? And I genuinely believe that the tipping point for us was when we committed to following Bab's plan and taking the steps and doing the activities that she said would have the greatest impact. And she said it's not going to guarantee that we will be successful. It's not a promise that this will work. But what she said was it'll increase the likelihood of success that much more. And so we started and we set on that path and we stuck to it. And I still remember the call we got on the last day that we found Rocky. 12 days. It was almost 2 weeks, and we found him just about 4 weeks before our wedding, 5 weeks before we opened this store. And at that point, it was early February. It was still freezing cold outside, but it took a long time. But on that last day, I had just gotten to the office. I was sitting at my desk, and Lauren called me with some news. She said she had just gotten a phone call that a woman who runs the neighborhood watch believes she had seen a dog that looked like Rocky in an abandoned house near her home. And so without thinking anything of it, I jumped in the car, I drove to North Philly. Mom actually cooked up 10 pounds of ground beef because one of the things Bab told us was if you can cook some good smelling food that's gonna potentially draw Rocky to it, he's hungry. He's been gone for almost 2 weeks. He hasn't had a good meal. It's a great way to draw the dogs out. And so Mom shows up at the site. She brings 10 pounds of ground beef. I'm sitting there. It's about 35 degrees. It's freezing and it's raining. The water's coming down. I've got a jacket on, but I decided that I was going to place the fresh cooked ground beef in the doorway of the abandoned house we were told to look. And under Bab's guidance, I was going to sit about 20 feet away and just wait. I just had to be patient. And that was the hardest thing I had to do because I sat there for 4 hours in the rain. And at the 4-hour mark, I was ready to give up. I actually called Babs. I turned away from where Rocky potentially was, and I'm on the phone with her, leaving her a voicemail. She didn't answer. And I said, I think I need to go into the house and look. I think I just need to give up. And as I turned back to the house and I looked down the long alleyway, I saw Rocky standing there in the doorway, head down, eating. And I froze. I hadn't seen him for almost 2 weeks. Yeah. He was skinny. He had lost about 25% of his body mass at this point. And he was just eating. And one of the most interesting things that I learned in this experience was that dogs, when they go and are lost for more than 1 or 2 days, will actually go feral. They'll revert back to their natural self in an undomesticated way. And so Rocky didn't recognize me when he picked his head up. We'd had him for 2 years and he didn't recognize me. But after about 10 minutes of Rocky sitting there and eating the food and getting a good meal, looking up at me occasionally, trying to figure out who I was, I saw that moment that the light bulb went off. And he walked over, he put his paws in my lap. I got to give him some head scratches. He still had the leash on from 12 days prior. And we hopped in the car and we got to drive him home. And the message for me that I got, and the learning for me that I got is how it relates to business and really to franchising. When we were building this business, when we were building this location, we were doing this totally on our own. We didn't have a playbook or a plan to follow. And so in the beginning, we tried this, we tried that. That thing failed, but this thing worked. And so we tried to do more of this thing that worked. But as we've built the business and as the franchise has grown, we've developed the systems, just like Babs developed her system for years of working and tracking dogs, that allows a franchisee to come into the system, follow the playbook, and not be guaranteed of success, but increase the likelihood that they'll be successful because they followed a plan that's been tested. And for me, it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through, was looking for Rocky, was bringing him home, was managing the stress and the emotion of opening a business, planning a wedding, looking for a dog that felt like part of our family. But to be able to go through that, to build grit along the way, and to learn the valuable lesson of trusting the process of a playbook that someone else has built and tested, felt like a lesson that I'll keep with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's a good story.
All right.